Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone. First thing, if you are a non-DAC member and you have public comment for either agenda items or non-agenda items, you need to fill out a card now and turn it into the secretary over there. So does anyone need a card? No. Good. Okay, so everyone look over the minutes, please. DAC members look over the minutes. And if you have a correction, please let us know before we have a motion to accept. Yes.
I have a question about the minutes. By my count, there were 54 students present at the meeting, and the tally of votes is 48 votes, 12 for Alva, 36 for Gateway. So, appropriate to indicate that there are abstentions, or do we just let it work? They didn't vote, so they
Yeah.
abstained from voting. Right. Yeah, if they didn't vote, then I would stick abstention.
Okay, we have the one change. Okay, perfect. So, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion's carried. All right, as no one raised their hand that they had a non-DAC member had any public comment about agenda items, we will move on to the board update from Pamela Riviere, who stepped out for a moment. Well, in the meantime, I will introduce our staff liaison today is Patty Elkin, because Soretta could not be here, but she does not have an update for us. Okay, so we're just going to move on to Dr. Atkins' presentation. Where is Dr. Atkins?
All right, there we go. So today I want to talk to you about really Vision 2020, and I want to give you really a district update in terms of where we are right now in our school district. This is meant to be really for you, and so I would encourage you to ask questions at any time. I think we'll also have questions at the end if you do have any, but we'll just jump right in. But if you do have something that is really of something you want to talk about, just let me know. Raise a hand, we'll get right to you. All right, mission and vision. And here's something I have to tell you about the mission and vision. The mission is something that we really believe in. When you talk to our staff, and you talk to, particularly our teachers and our principals on the front lines, and even district staff here, we really want to make sure that each one of our kids can reach his or her highest potential. And that requires a lot of work, a lot of effort. The really, really cool thing, though, about today is that here, living in the United States and living in Lee County, I think we have an opportunity to do that like no other time in our history. We have phenomenal technology that allows us to differentiate learning to meet a student's needs. We have incredible teachers, and we really, what I found is a community that is there to support us. So I don't think those are not just empty words, but we are at literally a remarkable time with the technology that we have, that if we put that technology to work, we can be there and truly be a world-class school system. And that means our desire, our goal, our objective is literally to be one of the best school districts, not just in Florida, not just in the United States, but to be a world leader. Now, to do that, you have to have a plan, and that's what Vision 2020 is about, is really a plan. Where do we want to be by the year 2020, which is going to be here before you know it. I mean, 2020 is literally right around the corner. We want to be in the top 5 in terms of the school districts in Florida by the year 2020. In fact, we want to be the #1 mega district in the state of Florida. There are what we call mega districts, or the top 10 school districts in terms of size. We are ninth largest school district in the state of Florida. We're like the 33rd or 34th largest school district in the United States. So very large district. We want to be #1 in the state of Florida. We think we can get there. We have a plan. This is the plan. These are the main goals of that plan, which I'll talk about each one of them briefly. But our #1 goal, our first goal, is to increase student achievement, because that's why we are here. We're here for kids. And our job is to make sure that our kids are ready for college, are ready for career, are ready for, whatever they go into after high school. We want them to be successful. Now, this starts very early. And one of the things that we have learned is that a high-quality pre-K program before kids get to kindergarten really sets them up for the future. There's a study, you've probably all heard about it. It's called the 30 million word gap, and that is that study that looks at 3-year-olds and the amount of exposure to vocabulary that they get, and students or kids that come from families where there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of dialogue, there's where they read to kids. Those kids are exposed to 30 million more words than students that don't come from that type of a background. And then when they come into kindergarten, there is that gap. And our teachers have to make up that gap. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is those kids make pretty good progress during that kindergarten year. Then they go home over the course of the summer, and they can go back as much as 2 months in their learning, whereas a kid from an affluent background or a background where you've got very involved parents, those kids continue to learn throughout the summer. And so then what happens, those kids get back together in the fall, and that gap that started in kindergarten has even increased further. So what we have done is we've started, first of all, let's eliminate that gap coming in, get with our pre-K providers, and because we can't do it in our district just by ourselves. We also have a lot of pre-K providers that are out there in Lee County who want to help. They want to know, what does it need for our kids to be successful in kindergarten and in the district when they come to our public schools. So we have we just received a $40,000 grant from the Southwest Florida Foundation, Community Foundation, that will help us provide what we call as the School District of Lee County Preferred Pre-K Provider. These are providers who have met certain standards and will be really helping kids meet those standards so that they are ready for kindergarten. So what that will allow us to do, if you're a pre-K provider, is to say, hey, parents, if you bring your kids here, we'll make sure that they're definitely ready for kindergarten. We're also, by the way, before I get into the curriculum piece, we're expanding our own pre-K program. We just received a SIG grant, or a school improvement grant, for $2.8 million, which expands pre-K education. This one is focused on James Stephens International Academy, but we certainly want to expand that out. That's going to allow for us to be able to provide more slots in our pre-K program within the district. Okay, curriculum. It's all about teaching kids to read, write, mathematics, science, social studies. Well, I will tell you that we have to do really a better job if we want to be that top #1 school district in the state of Florida. So what we've done is we've looked at our data, we've looked at the analysis of where we rank in the state of Florida, and unfortunately we have been looking at reading scores in our ranking that has actually declined over the last 4 years. The reason for that, we were on a 7-year really going in the right direction and climbed. And then we experienced, I think, in the district, a lot of changes down here in the district office, a lot of changes up there on the board, and I think a lot of that is that you also had changes in our reading program and our math program. Schools started doing different things, and we lost that fidelity that we had earlier. So now we're investing and getting that back. I challenged the team. I said, we need to, in fact, I introduced them, or not me personally, but we insist on using real proven techniques for selecting strategies that work. One is Six Sigma, which is really a quality principle, quality process called DAC, which is really where you are really truly defining what that problem is. You're doing the analysis that you should be doing, selecting strategies that work, and then making sure that you control for variance and that you ensure that those strategies are successful. So you're constantly evaluating what you're doing. So we're investing significant dollars, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to make sure that we have a reading program that meets the 5 pillars of reading with fidelity, and that it's done properly at every single school across the district. Mathematics, making sure that we don't have gaps in a kid's learning in mathematics, because as a kid goes through school, they have to master certain content at a very high level before they can build upon that content. And what we're seeing right now, and I'll just give you a real good example of what's going on, we see kids that are coming through doing fairly well. They hit middle school. There used to be a real push to get them into 8th grade algebra sometimes before they're ready for 8th grade algebra. They were able to pass that test and then move on into high school, and then they hit the wall. We're ranked 51st or 52nd in Algebra 2 out of 67 districts. That's unacceptable. 51st or 52nd. And that's because those kids aren't prepared mathematically, and so many of them are hitting that wall in geometry and Algebra 2 and other math courses in high school. So we've resequenced that. Social studies, the same thing, and science. I'm an old science teacher. I love science. And what we were doing in science, we had to go back and look at that curriculum to make sure those kids are mastering concepts. So if you hear us talk about our standards for excellence, that is about taking our curriculum, instead of forcing kids to literally learn 40 concepts in a subject per year, which is way too many. This is a typical flaw in American public education, which you do not see in some of our more successful districts and countries around the world. Those kids in those where you see more successful results or better results, they are truly mastering those concepts at a very, very deep level and not teaching nearly as many of those concepts, but teaching them well and making sure those kids build upon that before they go to the next grade level. That's what we're doing here. So this is an example of, these are the English ones, and this is just one example of what on the left is really what the standard is, and on the right would be what is a student really able to do if they meet that particular standard. And the really cool thing for teachers is that you'll know what you need to be teaching in terms of the standards for excellence, but also you'll be able to differentiate that instruction. So if I have a kid that is already proficient, I have activities, I've got things that I need to be doing with that kid to really get deep with that particular concept so they know it extremely well. They know it for their life. You know, there are certain things that that you've been taught early on that you know for the rest of your life because you were taught them very, very well. And we have to do that with everything. So if we're talking with mathematics, fractions, decimals, long division, those kids really understand those skills before we start getting them into things, more abstract things like algebra. And also making sure they're ready for it, because people move from concrete thinking to more abstract thinking at different times, and making sure we're making those decisions based on what's in the best interest of the kid, the child. So standards for excellence, you'll hear more about it. The ELA, which is English Language Arts, Those standards we're going to be piloting in the fall with some of our schools while we're developing math and science. And I think what will happen here as a result of this, we'll be leading literally the state and the nation, because we know this is the right way to do it. The research says it's the right way to do it. Unfortunately, with the way things are now, you've got literally textbook companies and corporations driving this stuff based on a dollar. That's not what's best interest for kids. And we think this is really going to make us a much better school district. Speaking of that, in terms of preparing kids for the future, we have set a pretty aggressive goal with industry certifications. These are things like being able to teach kids computer skills. I mean, there was a program last week at Dunbar High School where kids are graduating. They're receiving awards for certifications. You would be amazed at the number of certifications in computers and other technology applications these kids are walking out of high school with today. Just absolutely phenomenal. And they can go out and get into high-paid professions right out of high school, or really put themselves in a really good position for technical school or for college and university. So our goal is to get to 52% of our kids by the year 2020. And we're already, in terms of the state of Florida, doing really well with our career academies, with Dunbar High School being you've probably heard this many times, but the only Microsoft certified school in the world is right here in your backyard. Kids coming out of there, getting Ivy League scholarships, going off to prestigious universities and majoring in engineering and the sciences, among many other great things that are going on at that high school. But a lot of that is about industry certification. It's not just Dunbar. You know, you're also looking at a lot of most of our schools do have a component of these certification programs in them. The new Bonita Springs High School has that aerospace academy. They have a technology academy, so there's going to be many certifications you'll be able to get there as well, which is really kind of cool. All right, graduation rate. We have to increase this graduation rate. If you look at our goal was to be over 75% this past year, but we actually ended up exceeding this year's goal last year, so we're over 78% already. And if you factor out charter schools and you just look at our regular traditional 13 high schools, our graduation rate is in the high 80s, is like 88%. If you look at like what's the traditional, like Fort Myers High School, Lehigh Senior High School, those schools have a much higher rate than even 78%. But our goal is to work even with our charter schools, and in their defense, sometimes they're taking on some of our most difficult cases. Kids that have dropped out of our school or even get expelled from our school sometimes will go to some of these alternative charter schools and be successful, and we want them to be successful even if they weren't as successful in our district. So we're trying to work more with partners. Soretta, for example, is working on that project. Soretta Ralph and Shelley Taylor, among others, are working to make sure that we really work collaboratively to get that graduation rate up to 90%. There are certain kids that need additional time beyond the 180 days or beyond the regular traditional school day. And so we have extended day programs, and we're increasing the number that we have offered at our schools to 87% by 2020. It gives students more time to recap skills that they may not have mastered, but also gives other students opportunity to be provided enrichment. An example of this would be at our own STARS complex. They have a breakfast program, or a early morning program, I should say, Sunrise Club, which offers them tutoring, offers them help, assistance actually before schools, because those of you that have middle school kids, you know that they're moving into school in the a little bit later in the day. Is there a question back there or somebody? It also includes elementary programs. So you're looking at some of our elementary schools have before school programs, and many of them have after school programs. So we're trying to expand that also. Yeah. All right. This one, we've made quite a lot of progress on this particular goal this year. This is out of school suspension and reducing the amount of out of school suspension, but also still providing really meaningful consequences for, because our job, I think, is to, it's not about necessarily punishing, but it's about changing behavior. And if that means receiving a stiff consequence, that's what it means. But one of the things is that I found, as a principal, that often if you implement this inappropriately, out-of-school suspension sometimes even becomes a reward. I remember a kid I used to teach way back, when dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. But he'd get in trouble in school and he'd get suspended. Well, it turned out, when we were talking to his dad, that he wanted to get suspended because he'd get to go and work at the fish market and make a little money, and then he'd come back to school, and then he'd figure out where to get suspended again, and then he would go back and make some money. Well, he wasn't unique. Maybe working at the fish market was a little unique, but there are kids that do that, and it becomes the reward, and kids can't get an education unless they're in school. Now, you still have to protect the classroom, and you still have to make sure that teachers are supported, and I have zero tolerance for disruption of the learning of other students. But out-of-school suspension, across the district, we've really reduced this 30% versus where we were last year. We've already exceeded, if we're on track to already exceed the goal that we set in Vision 2020 in this. But I will tell you, I did this as a principal, and I watched my attendance go up, and guess what went up after that was our grades, our test scores, our student achievement overall, because kids were in school. And the program we had, alternative suspension program, actually turned out to be a much better deterrent. It changed kids' behavior, so less kids got in trouble as a result of all of those things. All right. One of the things that's critically important is increasing the retention rate of our effective and highly effective employees. This is something where we're struggling, okay? Just give you some short little numbers. We're hiring anywhere from, I've been doing work in HR since 2003, and we started looking at data back in 2005. We've been tracking this amount. We've consistently hired, since that period of time, anywhere from 500 up to 800 teachers every single year. So we have a workforce of about 5,500 teachers right now. We wind up probably replacing about 10% of that workforce every year. Part of that is because it has to do with retirements and things like that, but also growth is a component, because we're growing at a rate of about 1,600 kids per year. That's what we're projected to grow next year. It's what we're projected to grow this year, and we're just about going to hit that mark. So think about that, 1,600 kids per year. That means you need teachers, plus you're replacing those that are retiring. Now the problem is that we're also losing our new teachers in year 1, 2, and 3. We're losing them at an alarming rate. Unfortunately, and this is not a slight to our colleges and universities, which are actually FSW and FGCU are tremendous partners. They're absolutely tremendous partners, but they're only producing about 150 collectively teachers coming from those colleges. So what's happening? Oh, we're scrambling for a number. Oh no, we're video, aren't we? Yeah, okay. That's just not meeting the need. So what's happening is we're having to pull people from other professions, career changers, which is great, but often they've never been in a classroom, so we're having to teach them to teach. And so we're investing a lot in our own professional development so that our teachers can become better and also be more successful, so we don't lose all of those teachers. And I'll just, as she's looking for this, tell a real quick example. When I was a rookie teacher, Pine Island, I started at Pine Island, great place to start. Might understand now why that young man worked at the fish market. But there were two of us that started. I started, and this lady started. Oh, there we go. She was done in 1 quarter. She turned her keys in after 9 weeks. She couldn't control the class, and those kids. It was just her experience was terrible. I feel really bad for her, still even to this day. But she wasn't prepared for the rigors of the classroom. And here's somebody who dreamed about being a teacher, and in 9 weeks she was done and walked away, never to return. And so we need to do a better job so that doesn't happen, like it unfortunately is happening all too often now. So if you want to be a teacher, take a look at this video. Yeah.
Tatiana Lubin. I am a first grade teacher.
I'm Eric Bronson.
My name is Armand Kalugden.
Matthew Kay.
I'm Adam Malloy.
I'm Jorge Almodovar.
I'm Cassidy Kay. I am Mariah Washington. I am an elementary school teacher for the School District of Lee County.
My favorite part about teaching is absolutely the kids. They bring a positive energy, they bring a love of learning, and they really feel like they're in a place of comfort when they're in school.
My mom's a teacher, my dad's a teacher, my uncles are teachers. I have several aunts that are teachers and uncles that are teachers, so I guess it's something that's in my blood, and here I am.
There's nothing more impactful than being in a classroom with 30 to 35 students.
So I used to be an insurance agent for a local all-state agency, and I would drive to work every single day thinking I have to go to my job, I have to go to my job. And I was dating a fellow teacher at the time, and I got to really see the love and the passion he had for the career. And so I decided to make the jump and make the switch, and it's been the best thing I decided to do.
I worked my first 16 years as a teacher in Puerto Rico. When I saw this opportunity on the internet, exactly on Facebook, I said, that's the change that I want. And I applied, I made the interview, they gave me a chance, and I know this is the best choice that I ever made.
Just being here my whole life has really shown me how special this county is and how wonderful it is to work here, and the people that here are just incredible people that really care and are passionate about it, so I would encourage them to come here.
Being in this particular district for 13 years, I can honestly say I'm always being re-educated on one thing or another, and I'm always given tools to be successful.
It has to be something that you are passionate about. If you are not passionate about it, it will be difficult. But if you are passionate about it, just know that it is a rewarding field. It is a field that you will always feel like every day you go to work, you are fulfilling a purpose.
Once I graduated with my degree in history, I decided to give teaching a shot, and I fell in love with the classroom, and I fell in love really with the possibility to enact change through the classroom.
One of the bedrocks of education is that it does make the world a better place. I think that it is one of the most important jobs in our society.
Well, I've been teaching for about 2.5 months now. Before this, I was a felony probation officer for the state of Florida. I wanted to change it up for a little bit, make a difference in children's lives, and really see it from how you can make the difference in a child at an earlier age. And I realized that when I made that decision, I wanted to go ahead and go into teaching.
The training that's offered through Lee County has been incredible. I've learned about whole brain teaching and about how to use the smart board and technology, and all these classes that I've taken have really helped me develop into who I am today.
There's a lot of perks to being a teacher, but make sure they're for the right perks. And for me, it's making a difference and the rewarding things that you can get back from mentoring children.
Lee County School District does a great job with setting up teachers, doesn't matter the experience, with being successful. So I highly recommend coming to this district because you'll be coming to one of the best.
It's very nice, I love it. I love this place. I want to stay here for a long, long, long time. I love it.
Makes you want to go teach, right? I have to tell you now, there's 5,500 teachers in the school district, and I have not been in every classroom, but I have been honored to be in the classroom of several of those teachers. You know, Adam Malloy, Matt Kay, who is the husband of the lady who was talking about how she, insurance and change, that's his wife. And Mariah Washington, the lady who was talking about whole brain teaching, and she's learned so much in the yellow. They're phenomenal teachers. I mean, Mariah Washington, when you watch her teach, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. The energy that she has, the passion that she puts into her job on a daily basis. I mean, and there's no way for you to disengage in her class. I mean, those kids are like involved, they are learning. She's a phenomenal Golden Apple teacher. And then Adam Malloy, when we walk into his class, the history teacher, you just want to sit down and listen and be a part of his class, because the questions that he asks and the thought-provoking discussions that the kids are having with him, and because I went out to North, so several of those teachers are from North High, I was fortunate enough to see them, but they're just really, really incredible. And you see what it takes. I mean, it is about passion for the job and a love for kids and a love for the job. So if you know of people like that, because those people kids need people like that. They really, really do. And so we're doing everything we can to bring them here. Our teachers, in terms of a profession in the state, it's very competitive. And we have to pay our teachers well. We need to do other things like relocation bonuses, because a lot of people come from the Midwest. They come from up in the Northeast. We recruited in Puerto Rico this year because we were able to get take advantage, unfortunately, of Puerto Rico's difficult situation that's undergoing right now, but people wanting another opportunity to move here, and effective teachers that are also bilingual, because many of our students come from those types of backgrounds where they really could use that type of help. So all of these things to help, but we also need you, because we think that I will tell you, as a kid who moved down here from Ohio with, just literally started as a teacher, I think there's a lot of opportunity in a school district just like this one. I mean, it's an amazing place, and I'm so fortunate to have come here back many years ago. All right, let's go on to the next thing. This is, so we do want to decrease that instructional turnover, and we need more of guys like this guy, I can't even say this shady character on the screen here, Mr. Burnside. Mr. Burnside is one of the most innovative recruiters I've ever seen. I mean, this guy, he and I went to Tallahassee. We were working on our doctorates at the University of Central Florida, and we'd gone to Tallahassee to watch that disaster that they call a legislative session. And so, we got done with our day, watching the House and the Senate, and we were back. Well, I was ready to come back to the hotel room, just kind of kick back, watch some TV or whatever. He's out recruiting. He's out looking for a band director, and he found one, and so he found a band director for Dunbar High School. But he is constantly working to try to bring quality teachers to Lee County, and he gets results. So we also need highly effective administrators like that hold on to those teachers, because we've noticed that a great principal, great teachers just are attracted to them like magnets. And so you cannot turn a school around. And I'm not just telling you this out of experience. I've experienced it, but it's also research shows that you cannot turn a school around unless you have an effective principal in the seat. Now, not everybody can do that job. It's a much rarer commodity or a person than you might think. So anyway, we need great principals. We are working on a Grow Your Own initiative, and we've had a lot of success with that this year. Suncoast Federal Credit Union, or Suncoast Credit Union, has stepped up to provide us a $250,000 really a grant, or given us $250,000, $50,000 a year, to provide a full scholarship to either FSW or FGCU for somebody who wants to go and be a teacher. So that is starting now for the next college year. So if you have students that you know that might be interested, pretty soon our Human Resources Department will be putting out information about that. And another success story, as long as the governor signs something he needs to sign, our legislative delegation also went to bat for us and got us $100,000 of seed money to also help us provide full scholarships, tuition, and books for FSW FGCU. And this also includes not just our high school seniors rising up to college, but also juniors and seniors that are currently at FSW and FGCU who want to switch to teaching, come to the school district and work. So it's finishing their scholarship off, reducing, think about parents, you know, hey, don't have that debt, you know, that college debt, which is a killer for some kids. So that's a very successful, we think a very successful initiative that just started this year. So grow your own. All right, some of our other goals: increasing family and community engagement. We're just trying to really work on strategies because we found that successful school districts and kids that are successful in school have active parents, active guardians, totally involved in their education. Folks like you who take the time to come out and listen to dry presentations from guys like me. You know, we certainly encourage you to continue to become involved in your kids' education. Encourage others to become involved as well. We do put out surveys. Take the time, provide us feedback. We want to get better, but we want to make sure that we get your feedback and input as well. So you'll see more of that coming forward. Okay, this is a very important, so if you didn't hear or listen to anything else I said, hear this part, okay? This right here, if you look to the far left, that is a bar of capital funding. Now there's operating dollars, which is what we pay salaries, is where the majority of that is, salaries, materials, supplies. That's operating. Then there's capital. Capital is to build. Capital is repair. If I got to put a new roof on a school, if I have to, roof, that's the way we say it in Ohio. If we need to repipe a building, if we need to do anything like that major infrastructure piece, if we need to build a new school like Bonita Springs High School, which, by the way, we have to build, after we get done building Bonita, we have to build 6 more. Okay, we have to build another high school, we have to build another high school addition, both in the East Zone. We have to build a couple, some middle schools and some elementary schools, mostly in the east, some in the south. Okay? Now, again, on your left, you have that big bar. That was our capital revenue coming into the school district back in 2006, 2007, which represents approximately $321 million that was coming into the school district. We had 2.0 mil, that's what was levied for property taxes. You also had impact fees. You also had PICO, which is public education capital outlay dollars, and some other things coming in. So $321 million. On the far right, that bar represents about the $130 million that's revenue coming in today. Now, the problem that we have is, you heard me say earlier, 1,600 students coming into Lee County every single year. We're building a high school in Bonita Springs. The cost of that is going to be $50 million plus the cost of land, which we've already paid for. So, and by the way, people think, $50 million, are you crazy? Well, in Texas, they are building a football stadium for a high school right now for $60 million. In the state of Texas and in the wonderful state of California, they are building a middle school, high school combination for $1 billion. So I think 50 million, or whatever the final number is, it's not going to be the cost of the of the football stadium in Texas or the middle school, high school combination in California. And if you look at what are we paying for square foot, you know, the contractor's telling me, look, you're going to have the best deal in town. You can compare it to anybody. Because there's other schools being built 80 million, 100 million. You know, Google it and verify what I'm telling you. We're building a good product, but it does cost. And so if we're bringing in, and remember, we've got 96 schools, if you're not counting charters, and so 96 schools that you also have to have repaired. You have to have them maintained, some of them that are very old. So I think it's, you know, capital funding is an issue moving forward. Now, we're going to do something a little interactive right now. So if you've got a piece of paper, you got a phone or calculator, if you want, I want to give you some information, and I just want you to help me with this math problem. All right? So we did have an increase in funding from this year to next year. That increase, as it stands right now, unless the governor vetoes the FEFP, or the General Appropriations Act, the GAA, we're going to receive $13,891,358 more this year or next year than we did this year. So, right, if you want to write that down, $13,891,358. Okay? Now, sounds like a lot, but remember, we have 96 schools. We also give dollars to charter schools, so 121. Then you're looking at 93,000 kids. You're increasing by 1,600 kids. Those kids need teachers. 1,600 is the size of Bonita Springs High School. So if you think about a high school holds 1,600, so what does it take to support those kids? Also, our teachers, our principals, our teacher advisory committee, our principal leads, board members who hear from parents are saying you need to do more for ESE, our ESE kids or kids with exceptionalities, you need to do more. Also, if you go to Dunbar High School during the course of the year, they're getting a kid brand new from another country every single day. And it's not just Dunbar High School. It's a lot of other schools like South High and East High, Orange River Elementary. So kids are coming in like at Dunbar High School that have never been, they're 15 years old, and some of them have never been in school ever. You know, some of them have been to school up to maybe 3rd grade, and that's the greatest education they have is up to 3rd grade. Now they're 15, and the state of Florida wants you to make sure they graduate in 4 years, okay? Or they're going to count it against you. But you know what? Carl says, that's fine. I don't care. You know, even if it hurts my graduation rate, I need to do what's best for kids, so bring them on. So that's what he's doing, is bringing them on. Well, these kids come, what country do you think majority of them are coming from? Any idea? Guatemala, yes, Guatemala. Majority of them coming from Guatemala. That's the fastest one growing right now. Mexico, Cuba. Now, kids that come from Cuba, you typically come with a much better education. So they acclimate, assimilate much more quickly. Kids that come from Guatemala have probably the greatest struggle. Mexico's another place, Haiti, but Guatemala is the biggest one. So, need to do more for ESE. Need to do more for ESOL, which are again kids that where English is really not the primary language in the home, and the kid might be monolingual. So, some extra dollars there. But primarily, the biggest chunk of that is to pay for growth. So here's this second number I'm going to give you, $10,171,000. That pays for growth. Okay? Now, so you can subtract $10,171,000 for that. Okay, now the dilemma, again, you have that situation where you have reading, math, science, where you're going in the wrong direction. You have to invest in that program. Okay, the board just really approved last night, but it looks like we're going to be able to support everything we need, which is really supporting all of our schools with everything they need to in addition to what they have now, but that's going to cost us approximately $5 million. You think about, again, the number of kids that you have, so subtract that. Okay, now you know where you already are, right? Well, I have another number to give you. The state has increased what the district is required to do in terms of FRS, which is the Florida Retirement System, and so it's increased that rate. It's going to cost this district $1,800,000. That's something I have no control over. Oh, and by the way, speaking of no control, back to that growth number, a lot of that is driven by the class size amendment. So even if I wanted to, so what's the number right now? Minus $3 million. So, and there's other things that we really need to do in the district, like I talked about professional development for teachers. We want to make sure that we're very competitive so we can attract and retain teachers in this district. You see the difficulty that we're having here. So the funding that's coming out of Tallahassee this year, it will be spun as if it's really some fantastic thing for, and I don't mean this to be, I'm just telling you honestly what we're up against, and this is our kids. I mean, and our job is to try to give them the best possible education that we can. But it's very difficult to do when you have budget challenges like that. And by the way, the last thing I'll tell you, and I'll leave you alone with the depressing part of it, is that per pupil spending in the state of Florida, we're spending about $7,600 per kid. That's $1,000 less than the state average. And Florida ranks, and it depends on which poll, but Florida ranks about 41st in the nation. Now, sure, yes, it does cost more to live in New York. It costs more to live in California. I mean, I get that, and I understand it's not quite an apples-to-apples comparison. But I think you get the point, the gist, that I think we're very efficient as a school district, but we really have a need, and this is about kids. All right, let's go on some more positive things. We set a goal to raise $1 million this year, because you can see with that funding gap that we have to do something about it, and we can't always depend on Tallahassee or Washington, D.C. to do something for us. So we've got to stand on our own as well. So we're becoming more efficient as a school district. That's why we're using Lean Six Sigma to make decisions and improve process and become more efficient and do more with less, but also raising dollars ourselves. And you'll hear more about this in the upcoming future. Lauren is one of the leaders in this area. She is really driving a naming rights initiative that we have in the school district, which I think we have a little bit more on later. Yes or no? I can't remember. Okay, great. It's all in this one. All right, so naming rights. So if you want to name a football stadium after you, you can do it. You just there's a little price to be had, but you can do it. And we do have some people that have already stepped up and they want to do that. Now, we have a process where we really vet them, and if you want more information, Lauren is the person who can answer that for you. But you'll see some of it on our web page, so digital naming rights and things like that. We have already this year exceeded our goal of $1 million right now, including some grants, $3,276, and it changes every day. Bonita Bay, the community of Bonita Bay, wanted to put their name on they call it the field house. I guess that's a Canadian thing, right? Any Canadians in here, but they want to call it the field house, not the basketball court or the gym. But they want to call it Bonita Bay Field House, I think is what the name is. But they've already raised like $63,000 to do that, and they're committed to, you know what? We're not going to stop at the price tag, which was $50. We're going to keep on going because we believe in Bonita Springs High School and we want to give back to that school. So that's wonderful that community would do that. We're looking at grant dollars. We're looking at we're talking with the county commission, and I will say that I think that they are really wanting to partner with us to help the school district out. So that's a pleasant surprise. You'll probably hear us talk about PICO and even that sales tax word. But we feel we need to do everything we can because this is about doing what's right for kids. That's why we want to do what we do, because we want to make a difference in the lives of kids, and we think, you know, that a quality education does cost. All right, I do think, though, that we do need to do everything we can to demonstrate to the taxpayer that we're making the best use of your dollars that we possibly can. So this is about continuous improvement and looking at, even, like I just give you one example, we're looking at student proximity, a student proximity system. Right now today we're working in a partnership with the county and their GIS system. Greg Blurton is heading this effort up. But you can actually put in your address, and this is in the future, but we have the technology now. Put in your address, it pops up the 6 closest schools to you. And so instead of the 14 to 17 schools that some of our parents have in terms of trying to pick that, I don't know how you figure out between 17 schools which one to go to. But let's try to have something a little bit more manageable number. So the 6 closest to your location, you pick the school that you want, and we'll figure out a way to get there through transportation routing. Other things where we can stagger start times, because if you live in Cape Coral, you know that some of those schools are very close together over there, like Pelican, Skyline, and Patriot, very close together. Trafalgar Elementary is not too far away. Gulf Elementary is not too far away. You can actually go into a neighborhood off Skyline, pick up all those kids in one bus, and then drop them into 3 different elementary schools in a very short period of time. And you're having much more efficient routing that way. But you've got to, we're looking at that type of thing in our student assignment process, and you'll see that really start to impact our assignment of elementary students in either 18 or 19. We're hoping to do it in 18. Now, if you have an elementary kid, don't worry. You know, we want them to stay in their school where they currently are. This impacts people that are rising up new into the system. So that we want to eventually, and the only way we're going to get there from here is making sure no matter what neighborhood a kid lives in, that they're going to go to a high quality school. And just to show how committed we are, James Stevens International Academy was a failing school, and we put a dynamic team in there. Ken Savage is the principal, phenomenal guy. You also have a high-quality instructional team that's in that school, and our data that we've seen over the course of this year using STAR 360, which is our progress monitoring tool, they are, at least 2 of their grade levels, they are actually outpacing every other elementary school in the district. Number 1 at that school. That school was failing the year before. So I really don't think it's going to be that again, but in order to do this proximity system and do it justice for every kid in Lee County, we've got to make sure that every kid in Lee County has a high-quality school located very, very close to them. Yes, sir. Are you going to do it to middle schools, too? Good question. Are we going to do it to middle schools and even high schools? Yes. We were going to start with elementary, and then as it percolates up, we're going to start the system, in the middle school and then the high school level. We're also looking at other things like arterial routing. So if you want to go to a magnet school or something like that, there's a way if you want to get your kid to a bus stop or depot where you can do that and get your kid there, and also giving parents maybe more options if they want to drive their kid themselves, all in an effort to try to become as efficient as we possibly can with our transportation system. So I think that brings us to the end of our program. Or at least my discussion or piece of it. Are there any questions that you might have? Yeah, PICO is a public education capital outlay. It used to be another source of capital dollars that the state used to provide schools for new construction and also for maintenance. Last year they reduced it, so they eliminated it. Last year they brought like a little bit back for maintenance. This year, I don't believe there's anything in the budget for PICOs, but we're trying to get that put back, particularly for growing districts. We're one of the few growing districts. Charlotte County, believe it or not, is losing 50 kids next year, projected. And we're growing 1,600. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what's happening. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, she's asking that I ask you to come up to the microphone. So if you have a question, please come on up here.
There. Scott Smith, Gulf Elementary. I have a comment and then a question. The comment I'll give, and I've given it before, on the district's need for additional capital funding and those things. You have a great resource in this group and in other groups. I think when you give presentations and your finance director gives presentations, they're excellent. I think what you need to do is work on talking points that people that support you can then use to spread it through more of a grassroots and community effort. The political efforts that have gone on previously have not been perhaps as fruitful as you would like. So I would encourage you that you have a lot of untapped advocates that would support you that don't really know what to go out and say. So I would encourage you to think about that. In terms of the question, you talk about ESC, and there's a lot of focus in the Vision 2020 on how to bring up our lowest students. I'm particularly concerned about the other end of the spectrum. You know, it's important to also look at our top achieving students, and every time I hear about changes, I hear about the middle schools going to a 5x5 block, I hear about doubling to splitting language arts into language arts and reading, I hear about language arts, reading, and math every single day, and the electives dropping off. I worry about where the people are going to come from that are going to be, I understand everybody needs an education, everybody deserves one, but where are the people going to come from that are going to help us cure cancer and figure out the world's problems? And those students that are at the top of the game, are we saying, well, they can figure it out themselves and we're not going to help them continue to excel? How are we going to push and challenge them? Everything I hear sounds like we put less and less focus on the kids that get the 4 and 5s on our state exams, and it's all about how we bring up the 1 and 2s. Can you address that?
Yeah, we would be happy to, and I really appreciate all those comments. First of all, just in terms of one of the things when I was done is just to say to you that I do really want to enlist this group. You are our largest, very active parent advisory committee, and so we think it really starts with you all going out along with our teachers and principals to really spread the word. So we will absolutely do that, and Lauren is our communications director, and it was great for her to be here to hear that, because we have started to think about we've got to do a better job with engaging our community, and I've got to do a better job with asking groups that I speak to do something instead of just speaking. Regarding our higher level students, that has actually come up. It's been feedback that we have received. So I did go to Dr. Carlin, who's over our in fact, husband, Judge Carlin, is in the audience today, so he can attest to this. But Dr. Carlin, who heads up our strategic plan, we want to go back and look at our targets as we go reformulate that in July, so that we have some targets there specific for our higher achieving students, because we do feel, that really portion of it was left out of the plan and should be there. So we should have some targets for that particular purpose. And one of the things that I do want to mention that does will make a change really for those kids this year or next year, is that if you look at reading and mathematics and science at the middle and the high school level, part of that whole plan is to do a better job with those higher achieving students. What I found as a principal is that we were doing a pretty decent job with our lowest 25% with reading, but then we were watching, I was at Paul Lawrence Dunbar Middle School, and we had a very large gifted program, and I was watching gifted kids come through the program, and actually their reading started to drop. And the problem is, these are going to be the ones that are looking at the research reports, that are going to be the next scientists, attorneys, political leaders, corporate leaders, people that have to read it at a very high level. So if they're going backwards in middle school, we got a problem. So I reinstituted reading. I did get a little bit of resistance, because they want their kids to be in those electives. But I think once we showed them the value of that we were actually preparing your kids much better for high school, that got turned around really quickly. So good points, and that's what you'll see moving forward, because we want to encourage more participation in our higher level coursework, our AP classes and our really rigorous classes particularly at the high school and middle school level.
Good evening. My name is Lexa Donnelly. I am representing Harns Marsh Elementary, and I have two questions. The first of which goes to the program that you put something on in the presentation about that is located on Edison Avenue, a before-school program for enrichment, and that children from other schools could go there, and then there were a specific handful of other schools that they could be bused to afterwards. Are you planning to expand that program, particularly in the East Zone rather than in the Central Zone, for students who would not be able to have transportation to the middle of downtown Fort Myers? My other question goes to highly effective administration and staff that are brought in to turn around failing schools, one of which you mentioned in the South Zone. It has been my experience in these schools that often those teams, once the school has been turned around, leave. And then when a new administration comes in, the changes ripple down to the students and disrupt not only test scores, but also whether or not other teachers who are highly qualified stay at that particular school. So it tends to be a multiple years long effect. Is there a program in place to leave those teams at those schools that they turn around, or is this going to be a constant round robin, change a school, and then put another team in place, change a school, put another team in place, which then ends up sort of backtracking on those schools?
Okay, both very good questions. The first question, one of the Vision 2020 goals is to literally expand those programs, particularly in the East Zone. And the transportation is also very important. And just an example of something we did do this year is we provided East Lee County High School a bus over and above what we normally allocate to most other high schools, because students were having a very difficult time participating in those after-school programs because they did not have transportation. But our goal is to make sure, to really try to have a program offering for all of our students. It's a work in progress. The community part, the reason why we started like at Stars Complex and with the Haitian American Club is another example of where we started. And we've got 3 of those programs going right now, is because we've had partners that were already in place ready to go. But yes, so that's the intention there. The other was a really good question. I ended up making a little over 90 administrative changes last year to get high quality administrators into the positions where we really felt they were going to be the most effective. The good news is that this year, as of today, but I don't have any plans to make changes. Now, we'll wait on to get some data in from the final part of the year. Any changes in terms of principal teams, principals I'm talking in particular, and that also would include instructional staff, because the changes that we made last year, we found overwhelmingly they've been effective. And but we also know that it takes multiple years for that to be successful. And then what we have found is what she mentioned was that if you go for only 3 years, which is originally what the original plan was way back when we started this, I think in 2012, you pull them out in 3 years, and then you start to see the change, and you start to see the program go back. The teachers leave when a principal leaves often. And if you don't get as an effective principal in there as you had before, then you see the school start to go down, and then you're right back where you were. So our plan is to keep those teams in place as long as they're being successful. So, any other questions?
Andrew Evans, Tanglewood Elementary. I think this is an appropriate follow-up to what you had just been discussing. I was curious as to what metrics are used to evaluate the principals. What makes an effective principal, and how, I know I've read what you've said to the press. I've attended your speeches, so I know you're a proponent of data-driven decisions, so I expect that you have some specific metrics
Yes.
for this, and I'm interested to find out more about that.
Okay, absolutely. We have what's called a balanced scorecard, which is what we use for every single school. And then we do what we call a quarterly data chat, which is where the principal comes in and they talk about their data on a quarterly basis, and then there's at the end of the year wrap up in terms of what that data is. So what are the metrics that we're looking at? Well, you know, one of the obvious ones would be we're looking at the change in proficiency at the school, so the number of students that are scoring at a proficient rate, not just achieving proficiency, but we also are looking at the learning gains that are being achieved at that particular school. Okay, so that's one thing, is your normal standardized testing data that you normally would get from the state battery of tests, whether they're end-of-course exams, the Florida FSA, we look at all of that data. So that's one of the data points. You're looking also at graduation rates at our high schools. You're looking at and you're looking at that also at our other grade levels as well. But graduation rate is a big one at high schools. You're looking at the certifications that we talked about, so the number of certifications that a school is doing. We are looking at, we are also looking at metrics such as the teacher retention rate. So we look at how many teachers are retained in that building, because our experience is that typically an ineffective principal, you see a lot of turnover at that building, a lot of teachers leaving that building. You have to have a consistent instructional team. So if you see turnover, that typically is indicative of a place where there's trouble. And so we're looking at teacher attrition data, teacher turnover data, teacher retention data. We are also looking at evaluation data that comes from the supervisors. The supervisor evaluates administrators on a number of different metrics. So in addition to those data points that we're looking at, we're also looking at that. We also look at what's called CESR data. And CESR data those are serious incidents that occur at a school, like let's say major fights, theft, any type of, you think about major situation, drugs, alcohol, something like that. You're looking at those number of incidents that are occurring at the school. We're looking at out-of-school suspension rates and that discipline data. So those are the metrics that we look at formally when we are looking at a school. We also, Dr. Pruitt is our Chief Human Resources Officer. She tracks labor issues such as grievances, arbitrations, and things like that. Now, fortunately, we don't have a lot of that in the school district, unlike a lot of school districts. But grievances, that means where you have employee concerns that are going on at that school. They look at number of new teachers. They also look at the data as it relates to compliance and budget issues in terms of how are your budget audits at your building, how are you about things like due dates and meeting certain HR deadlines. So she tracks that data, and then all of those things are brought to bear, in the final evaluation of a school principal. Now, along the way, though, because evaluation is an ongoing process. It doesn't just happen at the end of the year. So our principals come in and meet with a team on a quarterly basis. So after first quarter, they come in, we review their performance data, we review many of the things I just talked about, and if a principal needs help, assistance, if they have the team right there, like Soretta Ralph and people that are in the district office that, their supervisor, but also other people. So if there's a specific need, they can ask, and we can take care of a problem early in the year rather than waiting to the end and having it show up in data that we can't do anything about. So that's probably a long answer to your question, but there you go. All right. Any other questions?
Hi, Kelly Lavis, Three Oaks Middle. And first of all, I wanted to thank our board member and Dr. Atkins for your ongoing commitment to student success and your dedication to Lee County Public Schools. No one can deny that you've handled numerous challenges with grace and poise, and I am also thanking you on behalf of my Three Oaks Middle SAC committee meeting. So they all came, and I'm just so proud and thrilled. But I did want to express some concerns about Vision 2020, and I know that you're all data-y and everything, and I will get you the data if you really need it. One of my concerns is that we've already talked about the importance of getting high-quality educators. But last year, there was an ad that went out requesting parents to jump in and come and teach. And my concern as an educator is that it's important to recognize the significance and hard work our teachers put forth to become educators in the Lee County School District. It denigrates their efforts, and it makes them feel underappreciated and tarnishes their efforts when we don't make sure that they have the proper certifications and qualifications. Obviously, we will never attract or retain the best and the brightest without further incentives. I know we've made some financial gains, but to truly attract extraordinary talent, we need to provide proper salaries and incentives. Furthermore, I think it's just shameful the way the legislator has been treating the Florida districts financially. And I know that there's issues with Florida Bill 7069, and you guys help, do whatever you can do. Right? Oh, and there is something about and then Miss Pamela Revere is going to talk about 706, and so is everybody else. Okay. Finally, or next to finally, growth. I know you say it's 1,600. I can guarantee you that if you drive along Three Oaks Parkway, it's like 10 million. And Three Oaks Middle is already at capacity. And it's just scary to think about the amount of schools we have cannot accommodate the growth. How in the, oops, I wasn't going to say that. There is also safety issues with overcrowding. With almost, if not over 100,000 students, one wonders whether Lee County is too big. Finally, testing, technology, and academies. Again, we had glitches in testing this year. Everything was ready to go, and the system went down on Wednesday. Sure enough systems went down and compromised entire schools. We need a plan B so that if something like this happens, we have a way of keeping on task and on schedule. These schedules were painstakingly created to accommodate all the tests that students are required to take. Finally, academies. We live in a golf capital. My husband was a golf course superintendent. I would think that implementing an FSW used to have these programs, a golf course maintenance, certified golf course superintendent, and then now he's the captain, so obviously boat and motor repair. And that's it.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can react to some of that.
I knew that if I didn't do it now, you'd run away. So I wanted to
Thank you. All right, one thing, you saw me put up that capital graph, and one of the things that has happened is that we used to actually be able to move some of our capital dollars into operating, and that would help with things such as salaries. So part of those were to fund positions that helped us maintain our capital assets, okay, like maintenance and so forth, and we still do some of that, but we used to do about $14 to $15 million more, which we could, if we still were able to do that, because of that capital, if that capital fund was healthier, then we could put it right back into salaries. Okay, so that's one of the things, the more that we're able to do on that side of the operation helps us on this side of the operation. That's why it's very important that, and the other thing that I think is shameful I think that if Florida is growing economy is growing at 4%, that you give us a 0.35%, not even just barely a third of 1% increase when the state is growing at 4%. And this is the second year in a row that's happened, because last year it was 0.6 of 1%. Now we still managed to scrape together 3% across the board for our employees, which, by the way, doesn't really get your teachers almost to the Florida median, which is one of the lowest in the nation. Okay, almost to the median in the state of Florida. If you look at some of the other positions, principals, administrators, etc., they're even less than that. I mean, if you go to, and I love this one, we had a guy who was a principal here, and he decided to move to, I think, Georgia or North Carolina. Okay, so he's making about double what my salary is, and he's in a district that's like super, super small. I mean, and I'm not complaining about mine, but it's an example that's indicative of all of our salaries in the state of Florida, which causes us some other difficulty in terms of retention. All right, growth. I mean, we do, six schools. Let's see, what else do you want me to hit? I do have one I just forgot to mention. That's the testing with the technology. Trey Davis, who I think came here, first of all, the guy, when he first came here, he said, you've got a network security issue. So he's very well aware of it. He presented to me yesterday this amazing plan that will take care of that issue for us. And it's a little top secret right now, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's going to do the trick because of what it actually is going to accomplish. And so that we got the right guy on the job for that one, that's for sure, so that we don't have that type of glitch. And just so you know what it was, we had an internal one, which is we have creative students. They're innovative. And unfortunately, there's places out there that you can go pay for, if you're creative, you can pay for, these cyber bots to literally attack networks and bring it down. Then we also had an external threat all happening at the same time. But like what he said to me yesterday, he said, this will never stop, so we have to be ready. And he goes, it'll never happen again. And hopefully he's right.
Andy Erickson, Alva School, is something that I've been harping on for years, and I just saw an example of it where it was a good news, but not always that happens. For the economically deprived people who can't afford internet, these Chromebooks are nice, but you can't use them at home because they have no internet. There's this one student from North Fort Myers who's at a high school student. He drove 2 to 3 miles on his bicycle every day to go to McDonald's and use that as his workspace because he had a Wi-Fi there. He ended up with a 5.27 grade point average, so he had success for it only because he was determined. But there's a lot of students that are not. They don't have a car. Obviously, that's why he rode his bike. And they, of course, no internet, couldn't afford it at home, that kind of thing. There's a lot of them that can't afford the internet at home. I don't know, is there any way we can help those students?
Yes, I think there is a way that we can help those students. I know that Dwayne Alton, who was also someone here, I think, that came to present, did roll out a program where there was you could get internet access for students at a small price. I wanted to say it was $8 or $9, and so maybe we could look into providing scholarships for those students, since it is a relatively nominal fee. So maybe if you could, Lauren, just kind of jot that down, and then I can check back with Dwayne to see where we are with that particular program. But that is something that I know he rolled out there, but I've heard that before, and I think that's still a problem. So thank you for bringing that up.
Hi, I'm Julie Martinez, Allen Park Elementary. I'm a parent. I have 3 children who attend the school. And we were talking before, you were talking before about the performance of the principals, and I was wondering, before coming here tonight, I feel like the children are always getting assessed and tested, and I feel that as a parent, if I have any feedback, it has to go directly to the principal, or I go directly to the teacher. But is there some, and I haven't seen any, and maybe there is, I'm just not aware, but of like a parent survey of your experience that year, you know, with your child for that teacher at that school, and whatever teacher they may have, something like a tool like that for the parents. So it's not always, oh, gotta send an email, you know, gotta send an email to the principal, or oh, gotta talk to the teacher, but just something like, so they understand what your experience has been. So when the principals are meeting with their teachers, they have some feedback, positive, critical, but just something more of like more of a tool for the parent to have for that purpose.
Okay, really good question. There are two things that are happening right now in human resources, and they're around teacher evaluation and then principal evaluation that they're looking at. And they're 360-degree evaluations, so that a teacher isn't necessarily just getting feedback directly from the principal, but there's also looking at how can we solicit some input from actually students, and I also believe parents, but I'm not sure on that part of it. I know that it does include students, and the research out there, believe it or not, is the student data is some of the most accurate data that's out there. So districts that have actually used that type of evaluation, they've been able to demonstrate that it really is able, the kids are pretty honest when it comes to giving feedback about their teachers. Principals, talking about a 360-degree evaluation for principals, means if I'm a principal, I'm going to be able to get feedback from my staff, my teachers, in terms of my performance as a teacher, or principal, how well am I supporting them. So both of those initiatives are currently underway. I know the Teacher Evaluation Committee met this week. I haven't heard, I don't know if that part was discussed. Were you there? Okay. I know that Dr. Pruitt she's working on both those initiatives right now, and I hope that we are able to do that in the near future. So I know that we also have had some board members that have also expressed an interest in both of those types of evaluations. So it's not just, you know, we've heard that from our board, and our HR chief has taken that on. So more to come.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Well, let me just say that I want to thank you so much for your attention, and I also want to thank you for the very thoughtful questions. You know, please stay engaged. We will commit to you to get, if we didn't answer any questions or you have any additional questions, by all means, please provide them to us, and we will certainly get answers for you, and then probably try to get a little bit of information back from Dr. Pruitt in terms of where that stands right now. But we had just talked like a couple weeks ago about that, so it's definitely in good hands. But anyway, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. We're going to backtrack now, get the board update.
See, we are already providing for you this evening bullet points that you too can be proactive with. I had some here. I actually have them in 3 different sections, so if a few people want to pass them out for me, that would be great. And I believe we can also send it out to you electronically through Ms. Rader. We could do that as well, so it might facilitate you passing info along. So when you get that in your hands, then I have just a quick run through that I'd like to share with you. One of the biggest pieces right now that we really do need assistance with is for people to, and it will be probably a twofold play. We are requesting that the governor veto Bill 7069. We have sent our own letter. Dr. Atkins has already sent a letter from the district, including the board, to the governor's office requesting that. Let me share with you some of the reasons why it needs to be rejected. These are bullet points. I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary that I gathered from Florida School Board Association. One of the many objections to the bill is that during the legislative session, when leaders proclaimed our House of Representatives, they said, we are going to be the most transparent you have ever seen. They said we were going to be the epitome in this whole process. Well, this bill, 7069, was cobbled together, literally put together behind closed doors in a very short time period with no public input. Legislators took a 6-page, single-subject bill and tacked on the content of 2 very contentious bills, and then added the camouflage of other popular provisions from more than a dozen other bills to produce a document that went from 6 pages to 274 pages. The resulting bill includes provisions that are extremely complex, that are extremely controversial, and some provisions that have not been thoroughly vetted through the legislative process. In other words, there were not even any staff analysis that went behind it. Some of the provisions that were put in there had already been rejected in committee. Important for you to note that the provisions of the bill have no impact on the state budget. Therefore, if you reject this, if he vetoes this bill, it means what we have in the budget that will help us with our grow your own money, that part will still be there for us. What they did is they swept Bill 7069, I keep repeating that number for you, because most of the non-budget provisions in there were existed as standalone bills or had been included into another bill. They were not subject to conforming bill protocols. It seems possible that those non-budget related items that were included encourage well-intentioned legislators to support the bill, even though the bill was questionable and had unproven provisions that they would not support otherwise. It was unveiled so late in the process that there was no realistic opportunity for members of the public, and by their own admission, some members of the legislature, to even read the bill in full, let alone carefully evaluate its contents and repercussions. To make matters worse, the bill was designated as a budget-conforming bill, which made it subject to the constraints on amendment and passage that apply to a conference report. Legislators were not free to amend this bill at all, and they could only offer an up or down vote. Please note, the Senate only passed it by a margin. And this is where this is going to be a twofold piece that we will probably have to ask you to help us with. Number one, we would like to see the governor veto 7069. Once he vetoes it, then the second part will be for you to contact our legislative delegation and say, and tell them to vote to, we do not want them to override that veto. That's going to be very critical, and if I remember correctly, it's the Senate that's going to have that power to do that. So it causes problems. It causes problems with our Title I funding. It causes problems in that we have to start sharing half of our capital with charter schools, and most of those don't need any capital funding at all. Regardless, we have to give it to them. It also, the other part that is a real problem is the fact that they have created a situation where we as a school choice district, and we are, We work well with our charter schools. We do everything we can to come alongside them and assist them. We've got a good, positive relationship that we have done in Lee County. Sarasota County is another one that has done the same thing. And it slaps those of us in the face that have been doing things the right way, because some people have not. And they really do need to go back to the table on this. And ironically, today when I spoke with Dane Eagle about it, he was saying there are problems with it. And so we just really need to get the word out there. So we enlist your help, enlist the help of your friends. But this gives some talking points for people to put within emails and as you make phone calls. FAFP, we are short. We are not able to provide the raises. And the biggest tax cut, the $500 million, this is what kills me. That tax cut that they are providing, so it helps you as a property owner, and you may save $15 or $16. But the ones who are going to benefit from it the most are those that have properties that are not homesteaded, and a lot of those people are people who live outside of the state of Florida. And so it definitely hurts our kids. So there's a problem here, and we've got to talk some common sense. And obviously there are some PACs out there that have a far more powerful voice than we do. But we vote. I don't care how much money somebody gets for an election, we vote. And you need to be very powerful, and I don't usually do that. I'm not usually that loud on that.
If I could just add to that, one of the things that we feel that we need to do a more effective job of moving forward is literally mobilizing our parents, our teachers, our administrators, because we think that the majority of us are pretty like-minded, but we're not organized, and we have to become organized. I think what's happened is we do have other interests, and many of those are interests that are interested in the dollar, and I think we have a greater interest, and that's about kids. So I think we have a more powerful message. Our difficulty is that we just don't come at it in an organized fashion. So believe me, the point that was made earlier about bullet points is something that I think you'll see more of moving forward, and then us not be shy about asking for the help of our parents and our teachers when it comes to our kids. So, this House Bill 7069, even though it's not, quote, a funding bill, it impacts dollars and literally takes dollars out of our schools and funnels them in other places. And some of that, particularly the charter school stuff, a lot of that is going to corporations that do for-profit charters. And some of those charters, the practices of those charter districts are just, some of them have shut down in the middle of the year. That is certainly not in the best interest of those kids to have to go scrambling because they weren't making enough profit. We just had one that is getting ready to close. And so the district is going to have to step up and take care of those children. And that charter, unfortunately, was doing a good job with kids, but the organization behind it they were losing, quote, dollars. In other words, they weren't making enough to make a profit off of it, and therefore they decided to shut the doors. And it was not a decision that was made in the best interest of those kids. So this is just a bad bill. It is absolutely just smacks democracy right in the face, in my opinion. Open, transparent government. I don't know how they really get away with it, except that they rely on us not to pay attention. Well, we're paying attention now. So sorry for the editorials and the soapbox.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to make sure we don't have any public comment from non-DAC members about non-agenda items. Good of the order? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Great. Motion carried. Have a great summer. Have a great summer, everyone.